Welcome to the Rant Live. Hello, everyone. It's today is August 1st, one day before the trade deadline, which we're all really anticipating to come and go, similar to Wilson Contreras, who's been actually living it. Excited for this for tomorrow at 5 p.m. Central. Will be the trade deadline, and that's kind of what we're all looking towards. Is we've already had a couple of trades that happened for the Cubs. One was Chris Martin being traded to the Dodgers for Zach McKinstry, which I thought was a pretty interesting return, given Chris Martin is just like nothing really.
Right.
For the Cubs.
It's somebody who actually has, 4 limbs that are all functional. McKinstry has been. Yeah, McKinstry he's played in MLB at the MLB level. I mean, he was added to the active roster immediately, plays a bunch of different positions. I hesitate to say because, people look at this or they'll hear this the wrong way and they'll think the negative side of things, but he seems like a guy in that similar mold to Patrick Wisdom or Frank Schwindel in that he has a lot of minor league experience. He has played very well at the minor league level, but he did not have a shot with the Dodgers, right? He simply did not have a chance to get any playing time with them. Now he does, and you and I were texting back and forth. You took a much more optimistic view of it, in that he does feel like a nice role player type for what should otherwise be a competitive team. I kind of look at it like, well, the way they've kind of established it right now, like Morel has been kind of that role player guy, but I don't know that he'll move around a ton. Nico Horner is more 1 or 2 spots. And so this feels to me like, hey, here's a dude who can play all over. He'll be cheap and he can fill some spots for him over the next year or two, while they're not very competitive. But I do think that for a guy in Martin, who is easily the third of the 3 right-handed relievers they figured to move, the other 2 being, of course, David Robertson and Michael Givens, to get that kind of return, there is, I will come over to your side a little bit and say that over the last couple shows, I have said that it would be a good sign if the Cubs in their trades were looking for MLB-ready players who could come in and plug in right away. Zach McKinstry, probably not a difference-making type of player in that regard, but he is clearly an MLB-ready player, and that is quite a bit different from just going with a PTBNL or, some random flyer on a low A dude who's, 28 years old or something like that. So good.
Yeah.
Good trade.
I mean, in Martin's defense, he is a little older. He's 36 years old, but I mean, he's been decent the last few years. I mean, he was pretty good with Atlanta. I mean, he had a 3.95 ERA in 2021, 4.31 ERA in 2022. I mean, I think he's just a guy who's going to be able to come in and eat up, some of those relief innings for the Dodgers. I mean, whether they're ahead or behind, which they're ahead most of the time. So, I mean, he's a good guy if you just need to kind of lengthen your bullpen just a little bit, and need a guy who's not going to completely blow up.
Yeah, and I think the weird thing with him, if you look at the numbers, and I look like he's given up something like a 300 batting average. It's like 295 or something, despite the fact that he still has like a 54%, and it's like a 383 BABIP. But he's
393 BABIP. That's insane.
But it's like a 54% ground ball rate. Like that is wild that a dude gives up more than half of his of the contact on the ground, and they're almost batting 400 against him when they put it in play. Like that should even out. Again, I think on a good team, if used, and he does have pretty even splits too, right? So it's not like he's a righty only guy. I think the Dodgers probably look at that, and they might be looking at the differences in ballparks. Maybe outside of Colorado, the ball is carrying a little bit better at night in LA than it has in the past. We can put on that whatever you want, but by and large, I think his stuff will play better in the NL West. It's as strange as that may sound to people, because even though there are more competitive teams out there, I think it should work fairly well. So, I mean, I think he's a guy who they saw, and again, for them, McKinstry was a guy who was never going to get any playing time. He just was. So to them, he's incredibly expendable. and so they were able to move on from him, and it works out. I think it's one of those from both sides that makes sense.
Well, the interesting thing about McKinstry is, he was once a pretty highly thought of prospect for the Dodgers in their system, and he just never kind of came to fruition. I mean, he made his MLB debut in 2020, and he was actually decent. I mean, he wasn't terrible. He batted 286 with a 429 slugging, 286 OBP, not great, but he was striking out a ton. Right, he struck out almost 43% of the time. And so, he started 2021 in AAA, and then they bumped him up to the major league team again in 2021, and it just did not click at all with him. I mean, all of his numbers were just really bad, barely above the Mendoza line with his 2.15 ERA, and then again started this season in AAA. And so, but he tore it up in AAA. So, I mean, it's a guy that obviously has a lot of upside, because he was at one time a pretty highly ranked prospect in the Dodgers system. And we know that that's a very good system. And so I think one of the things with McKinstry is that he's out of options after?
I believe so.
I
believe he's out
option
after this year. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's a guy that they knew they were not going to be able to protect, probably. And that they were probably going to lose after the end of the season anyway. So you could kind of almost look at the way the Dodgers are looking at him was like, hey, he's a free agent after this season, because we're not going to protect him on our 40-man. And he'll probably get picked up by somebody in the Rule 5 draft anyway. So really wasn't much of a loss from the Dodgers, but kind of a cool upside play by the Cubs, I think. So a little surprising there, but I think they made the most out of Chris Martin, right? Like, this is a guy who, wasn't going to make an impact for the Cubs in any way, shape, or form, and really didn't. I mean, you could put anybody in the bullpen for the Cubs right now, and it just doesn't matter. Going forward, though, we definitely have our eyes on Ian Happ and Wilson Contreras. I mean, poor Wilson Contreras has just been, put through the ringer. I mean, all the attention seems to be on Wilson Contreras because he is kind of the more elite talent of the two, even though Ian Happ is having a career year. And will get, I don't want to say as much in a return for Wilson Contreras, but he could actually get, the Cubs could actually get more for Ian Happ just because he's got that extra year of control. Wilson Contreras terms out at the end of the year. What would be really interesting and what I'd love to see, and I just don't know if I have enough faith in the Cubs to pull this off, would be to trade Wilson Contreras for a big haul and to re-sign him in the offseason. But again, I just that'd be the classy thing to do. And it's about darn time the Cubs start doing something classy with the guys who have gotten them where, kind of to the mountaintop, because they've kind of run out of opportunities with the exception of Wilson Contreras. So it sure would be nice to, and it's not like the guy's not a good player and wouldn't deserve a contract. And I think he'd take a hometown discount.
Maybe. Although, again, I keep coming back to, I mean, it's so very rare. And I know people like to point to the example of Aroldis Chapman as someone who's done. I mean, he's not the only one. It's just exceedingly rare to see that stuff happen, just because of the fact that there is, while there is such a thing as, a hometown discount, or we saw, even if it's not hometown and coming back, we did see that the Cubs in 2016, were able to sign some guys for less money than maybe what they would have taken elsewhere because they believed in the direction the team was heading. However, Contreras isn't going to re-sign with the Cubs for a discount if he doesn't believe they're also going to be just as competitive as any other team that might be offering him more money, right? So there's a difference. You might be taking a discount saying, hey, I know that they're going to have to rebuild, or you might be taking a discount saying, I'd love to go back and finish my career again with the same, or continue my career with the same team I played for the entire time so far. But you're not going to go back to that same team and know that you've got another 2 years left, the 2 remaining best years of your career, perhaps, knowing that those might be spent rebuilding, right? I mean, he even said it in one of his quotes, and that was what was kind of interesting, is, the idea that he acknowledged his team was not built to win. And he even said he's learned some things from the losing. One of the things he's learned from losing may be that I don't freaking like to lose, and I'm not going to stick around. if that's going to be the deal. So they would have to convince him of a couple things, because if he goes out there, he knows what it's like to win. So I'm not saying, if he goes out and experiences winning, but he could very well, he's talked about free agency being a dream come true. I don't think that he's going to, will he prioritize the Cubs? Yes, but I think it would be more a matter of if everyone's offering the same thing.
Yeah.
If he's got 4 teams that are offering him almost identical deals, I think the Cubs have a shot in that because of the sentimental standpoint. But I believe he will prioritize winning, and winning immediately over returning to the Cubs from an emotional standpoint. That's what I believe will be the case with him. It's the team that can offer him a combination of the most money and the best chance at success. Which, speaking of, I want to get your take on this. I had a bit of a disagreement with one of our Facebook commenters.
Shocking.
I know, that's a surprise. Who said he does not believe Contreras will get more than 3 years or $45 million. He thinks Contreras will be lucky to land $45 million over 3 years.
$45 million contract.
He believes Contreras would take, if the Cubs offered it, Contreras should take it now, because there's no way he's getting that on the open market. This is what I was told. And I think that's completely full of shit.
I mean, that's not even worth the discussion. Actually, right. It's foolishness. He's, what he ends up getting in terms of length of his contract. I don't think you're going to see a 7-year deal, but no. Just because he's a catcher and he's going to be 31 next year, but you're likely to see 5.
I think 5 and 100 is not anywhere near outside the question. I mean,
no, I
might it be 95, but I think 5 and 100 is more than he should have.
Yeah,
but
obviously.
I mean, but no, I mean, I think and here's the difference, because a lot of people want to point to Bryant and Javi and Rizzo and what they got and how it was less than what the Cubs had offered. First of all, that stuff's all reported. We don't actually know what it was, but I think it's important to understand where that stuff, first of all, the context for when those offers were made, right, which would have been earlier in their careers, and they're also buying out some of the ARB years, and each of them when there were maybe some conversations or there's some hypotheticals that were thrown out, right? The one with Javi, that was prior to 2020. That was prior to the season being cut short. Javi was close to an extension. Then you had the shortened season. He played like crap there. He struggled a lot in 21. With Bryant, any talks, and again, that's been blown way out of proportion with what the deals was, but any real conversations that almost kind of sort of started, didn't get past the exploratory phases. That was before he hurt his shoulder and had any issues there. Anything with Rizzo, again, took place before, and I can't say before the back issue because he's had back issues for a while, right? But all of them then came off of down years due to injury or other things. And then when they got less, everybody's like, oh, see, Hoyer was right. But it's like, no, he gambled, right? He rolled the dice and it came up in his favor, is really how it worked. And we're certainly seeing that. People could look at Javi now. I think there's been some injuries there. Bryant's had some injuries. Rizzo's playing pretty well. But my point there is that was an entirely different situation. Wilson Contreras is now having the best offensive season of his career and was just named the NL starter for the 3rd time at catcher. So there is a markedly different situation with the way these things all played out, right, between these players. And so comparing Contreras to the others in terms of, not to mention the Cubs haven't had any extension talks with him for the last 4 or 5 years. So, which is actually similar to the last guys. There was never an attempt, but I think to look at that and say, well, those other guys got way less, so will he, is kind of silly because it's an entirely different circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think that, all the free agents, the big kind of core guys the Cubs cut free, obviously, is Anthony Rizzo is definitely the guy that's, making the most noise for sure. Chris Bryant is, man, the guy gets injured so much. It's insane. And I feel bad for him, but that's just the way that it is. And so it's not that he's not a good player. It's just that he just continues to get injured. Javi, is just Javi, right? And I would have thought that Javi would have thrived a little bit more with Detroit. I guess the fans aren't nearly as forgiving as Cubs fans, just on the other side of the Lake Michigan there. But yeah, I guess they're a little different. I'm not sure if they're just like they have a losing team in Detroit. Here's my thing: is obviously they're not that good. I mean, you'd think they could get behind Javi and like kind of the way he plays and just enjoy that part of the baseball, right? The game and instead of getting on Javi and a lot of boos for Javi, Javi gets booed everywhere. He gets booed at home. He gets booed in Chicago. He gets booed. It's like the guy, but I think Anthony Rizzo is definitely playing the best by far. I mean, but look at the team he's on though, too, right? I mean,
right, and look, he's got the short porch out there and right. I mean, he's like things set up well for him. If he played any place else, some of those home runs go away. But it is he has a ton of protection in that lineup.
Exactly.
To what extent that's really true? I mean, I've read some things about that. They talk about like, is that really a thing? But I do think whether the protection itself is real, based on statistical evidence. I think it is certainly when you have those kind of hitters around you, you can go to the plate as a much more confident hitter yourself, right?
And you're getting the pitches.
I
mean, that's the thing is that they'd rather pitch to you than half of the Yankees lineup.
No doubt.
If you're Anthony Rizzo. So that's a reality. There's nothing that's not true there at all.
When is the last time you've heard about Anthony Rizzo from a national perspective? Like there's Aaron Judge gets like 95% of the press. Giancarlo Stanton gets maybe 4.5%. And then the other 0.5% goes to the rest of the players on that team combined. And so that's a part of it too, right? And I know it can be cool and fun to kind of be the man somewhere, but you talk about the pressure that is now completely alleviated from you are not the dude the reporters are going to. You're not the dude everybody's wanting to get a piece of. Yeah. You can go essentially live your life in relative anonymity, show up, hit some dingers every once in a while. And I don't want to say no one cares, but like, man, your life has to be so much easier because you are not the one they're going to. Like, again, think about Wilson Contreras right now. All they talked about, because it was on ESPN, all they talked about the entire time was whether or not he's going to be traded. They're interviewing David Ross, asking about how Wilson Contreras is handling it while Contreras is walking out to the field right behind him.
Yeah, it's like a carnival. It really has like a carnival feel to it.
He's talking about it. He's the star. He's the man. If he goes to, it'll be big for a little while, but if he goes to, say, the Padres, right, they've got bigger players than Wilson Contreras. If he goes to the Mets, they've got bigger players than Wilson Contreras. Like, it'll be a big deal for a couple of days because of the trade. Mm-hmm. But that's another part of it. You go back to the Cubs, like, maybe he's looking at it going like, listen, he's definitely a guy who can handle the attention and who does well with the media. But part of that, you might look around and be like, dude, it's a pressure cooker. Like, these last few months, this whole season has sucked. What if I go someplace where I'm just, I'm the third or fourth dude on the list in terms of popularity, or fifth? Like, that's kind of appealing to some players after that. And to have, if you could do that with a long-term contract and just sort of just play your game and fade into the background, like, that's, I don't know, man. There is something, depending on your personality, there may be something very appealing about that.
Well, regardless of your personality, my gosh, he's like, he's just he is the Chicago Cubs right now, right? I mean, like, even Ian Happ is hardly being talked about. I mean, he's still being talked about, but he's being mentioned. There'll be a feature piece on Wilson Contreras, and then they'll say, oh yeah, by the way, Ian Happ is probably who will probably bring, as I said, as much, if not more, back than Wilson Contreras. But it's
unless they're traded together, and then who knows who brought them.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. And I think that's what your piece this morning had talked about, where the Padres are reportedly exploring a trade for Contreras, Happ, and Robertson. As appealing as that sounds, I'm not sure if that diminishes the return for Contreras and Happ individually. And I really don't like the fact that the Padres are in on the Juan Soto talks and then kind of in this big role with the Wilson Contreras, Ian Happ potential trade. I think that I don't see Juan Soto getting traded. I've said that. I'll say it again. He has 2 years of control. Why would the Nationals trade him? All they're really doing, and if I'm a GM, I'm mad at the Washington Nationals because especially if they don't end up trading Soto, because then this is something that's going to continue to lag on. In the offseason, the rumors will be, well, are they going to trade him? And then next year, if he's still on their team, we're going to have to go through this all again. And you've got teams that are kind of waiting there in the wings to see what happens with Soto before they pull a trade on any type of big name trade. And so it's a little frustrating from my perspective, but I got to imagine that from the GM perspective, it's got to be really frustrating too with this market.
Well, and I mean, it's the same thing we saw, right? If you remember Manny Machado before, I mean, he was eventually moved, but the Orioles were jacking around with that for a long time, and there were all these talks, and then that stuff all fell apart before the season, right? And then he gets moved later. Bryce Harper, remember what a big deal that was with Harper forever, and then they ended up not moving him at all, right? And he's able to go sign as a free agent. But that stuff absolutely crippled the market, and then not only as far as the trade deadline, but then Harper and Machado, when they then went to sign their free agent deals, right? Like that slowed that whole. So you can have one player. The Padres are holding a lot of cards here, no pun intended, because the cards are also involved. The Cardinals, with not Jose, with Juan Soto, and then part of it, you sit there and think, like, okay, the package that we've seen, the names we've seen related to the Cardinals are like, all right, cool. So, and this feels very Cardinals-y, and that's what scares me is something like this would happen. But like, it's like 4 mediocre dudes and not their top prospects, maybe one of their top 5 or something. It's like, that's not going to get it done. I mean, the Padres conceivably have, and then we talked about this too, like after all the trades they made a ton of trades for starting pitchers over the last few years. They could still have enough ammunition, so to speak, in their prospect ranks to get Soto and Contreras if they wanted to. Now, if they were to do that, I highly doubt. Here's the thing. With Machado and Tatis, I seriously doubt they would be acquiring Soto to try to extend him, because then you're talking about $1 billion between 3 players, more than $1 billion between 3 players. I don't think that happens. But if we go back to but
they kind of only need him for the remainder of his contract, anyways. I mean, if you think about their window, it's going to be closing probably at the end of 2025, I'd guess, right?
Right, and then if they can make some stuff work, But the thing that's intriguing to me is, so there's that in and of itself, right? Soto, that potential deal is holding a lot of things up. But then you look at, they also put in a bid, or put in an offer on Shohei Ohtani, which not going to happen, but still, that was there. They're
just like the drunk sailor who's been out to sea for too long.
AJ Preller is, first of all, clearly very smart, very aggressive, and very, very willing to do deals. And that's the thing, is that they're also possibly involved in the guys from Boston, if they're going to move him. And then you talked about the Cubs thing. Now, if that were to happen, so we've heard different iterations. We've heard that the Cubs want to bundle one of their all-star position players with a reliever. That makes sense. We've heard that the Padres talked about Happ and Contreras as a bundle. We've now heard Happ, Contreras, and Robertson, which also, if they do this, right, whether they do this or not, they want to get rid of Eric Hosmer's contract. We've talked about Hosmer. That deal in and of itself, I've used that clause a couple times now, but that deal alone for Hosmer would net the Cubs a top prospect. Now they'd have to take on a bunch of his money, but obviously we know they've got, that's the funniest thing. People are like, oh, it costs a lot of money for him. Yeah. Go ahead, look at the payroll. I think they got some money in there. We already know they're going to roll some over. But if just a deal to take Hosmer's money would land them a top prospect, and now you figure something out, that's where it would offset a little bit, because you're moving these guys together. If you moved all 3 of those players and took on Hosmer's money, that would be a huge return for them. It would have to be, right? Like, you're talking about multiple top prospects at that point. And you know, again, it's hard
to imagine what the return would be, to be honest with you.
And the thing is, though, that would have to be if Soto fell through. They're not trading for all 3 of those guys and Juan. So like there's no way that's happening.
Yeah,
and,
they just said their whole
wait a few
system would
hours
be
and then
completely decimated.
right, they'd have nobody, and then it would really shorten their window because again, you've got those guys for a lesser amount of time. But a deal like that, right, would be maybe instead of. But I think what you're also seeing here's the interesting dynamic, right? We mentioned all these guys San Diego's in on. Well, part of this is the thing. So San Diego holds a ton of these cards because other GMs now are like, oh shit, we might have to make a move now to stop San Diego from getting the guy we want. Or once San Diego makes a move, that clarifies things for everyone else and kind of sets those dominoes tumbling. So
Well, and
it's
that's the
very
interesting part because San Diego has no chance of winning their division because they're 12 games back, but they're in the wild card right now. But they're only 1.5 games up over the St. Louis Cardinals. And so, and Miami's down there. And I'm telling you, Miami has some young talent. I don't think they're going to trade for anybody, but if they do, that might be very interesting. They have some very talented young players on their team that get no national attention.
Ton of pitching.
And so that's a team that could come up and get in the race as well. But right now it's St. Louis. And so where you've got, the word out there, and I think maybe that's the Nationals are, they're benefiting from St. Louis and San Diego both kind of at least appearing to be in the running for the same player, because it's like neither of those guys wants the other to get Juan Soto. And so it's kind of, and that's another thing that slows down the market. Now the Cubs are not going to make a trade with the St. Louis Cardinals, I don't think, unless it's just, a small like Robertson or somebody like that. But they're definitely not going to be trading Wilson Contreras or Ian Happ to the Cardinals. I'd be very, very surprised if that happened. But the Padres, with their, kind of ability and desire to be involved in every single trade conversation, that's where things get a little wonky with, when are the dominoes going to start to fall? And they're going to need to start to fall within the next 24 to 36 hours.
Yeah, 24, 29 and a half hours, right? Something like that. It's 6 p.m. Eastern is the deadline, which isn't it usually 4? Am I making this up? I thought it was usually earlier. And I know
they changed the
because it's at the commissioner's discretion now. Yeah. So
he had until the 3rd.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's anywhere from the 28th to the 3rd or something, based on if it's on a weekend, which is weird. It's like, why not just do it on Monday? Like there's fewer games on Mondays. You know what I mean? And so to do it at a day like that, but as I have said, I'm at least thankful that the Cubs play after the deadline on Tuesday. Yeah. I would much prefer that the deadline were today, because then you wouldn't even have to have a player, they can make a trip with the team. But I do not want to see any of these players in the visitors' dugout at Busch Stadium getting informed of a trade. You know what I mean? Or going out to work out. Which, speaking of, were you a little bit surprised that Happ and Contreras were both in the lineup yesterday and in the game the whole time?
I've been surprised by a lot of things. Yes, that is one of the things I was surprised about. The other thing that I was surprised about was that Drew Smyly went out there, and not only did he go out there and pitch against San Francisco, but he did not throw well. I think he gave up 5 earned runs in a very short 3-inning outing or something like that. I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but it was something to that effect. I was really surprised to see that. I was surprised to see Robertson sent out there the other day. Yes, I was very surprised at that.
I mean, I guess at least it's a little bit better than, you don't even have to start them, but it's like, and they were on the road. That was the other thing. But Anthony Rizzo and Chris Bryant not even getting an at-bat, not being in the lineup, not getting an at-bat in their final game at Wrigley, that still sticks in my craw. I'm like, you could have easily done something to rectify that, give them that last chance, right? And I mean, Contreras was in the lineup. He got a chance, Happ as well. Although it's also funny, and part of it's like they clearly acknowledge it with Happ with Contreras, but as you mentioned earlier with Happ, they definitely were not, in the market to move any of that stuff. And so or nobody knows they're in the market for it, or they're not acknowledging that they're in the market for it. So it's a little bit weird to see that stuff happen. But
dude, this guy just came on. The New York Yankees are finalizing a deal to acquire Scott Efros.
No.
Yes, man, might need to take a little time to throw that one up real quick.
Son of a bitch.
That is Ken Rosenthal, Jeff Passan,
Passing.
whatever, Bob Nightingale.
Jeebus, dude.
That to me is very surprising. But they have to be getting something really good back, I have to imagine, because
what the fuck are we doing here?
It's the best bullpen arm they've got.
But what are we even doing here then? What are the Cubs doing? They've got a young, controllable bullpen arm, and that dude gets moved?
That shocking. Live on the Rant, you get to see our reaction to Scott Efros reportedly getting traded to the New York Yankees. And Evan will probably be posting that as we do the show. You're going to see us.
No, live. I can't because I have my computer separate. I don't have a keyboard that I can use.
I'll draft it up. Wow. That is yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Let's look up Scott. Let's look up Efros. I'm not off the top of my head real sure how much the return here has got to be insane, I would imagine, because I mean, here's a guy who's got 3 minor league options left. He's this is his first year. That doesn't make any sense. That just doesn't make.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
Are we getting Anthony Rizzo back?
I mean, but here the whole point, like, man, what? There is nothing about this that makes sense to me. The whole time I've been saying, people have been talking about, like, oh, they might trade Efros. I'm like, there's no way they would trade him. He's making no money. He's been a great reliever. Like, what is happening? This is his first full year. I don't get it. This is wild to me. Wild. What? Holy shit, dude.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to need some time to kind of digest that. But it's just when you're thinking about a rebuild that's got to happen. I mean, I guess you can't really do anything here without seeing what the return is.
It had better be huge. I mean, like
because this is a guy. This is like an Andrew Miller type guy. Granted, he doesn't have the pedigree that Andrew Miller had, but it's a level of talent in the same vein as Andrew Miller. Except it's his first year. I mean, they have what is it? 6 years of control.
5 more. Yeah, he's got 5.
And so if it's a player to be named later, it could very well be one of their draft picks, which would still be surprising because I don't even know who the Yankees drafted. It certainly wasn't one of the higher picks. Wow, shocking. I have a draft up. Not really ready in any way, shape, or form, but I'll try to get something ready.
I mean, yeah, throw it in there. I can put some meat on those bones later. But dude,
So here we have
a player to be named later. If it's not their top draft, I mean, I know it's not gonna be the top draft. I honestly have no words. I have no idea. This is incredible to me. I don't.
Yeah, if there's anything in the world that tells you that the Cubs aren't looking to win, it's a move like this. Because it's like, how does this get them anywhere near? You've got a guy who's clearly major league ready, right?
I mean, probably not. Not if it's a player to be named later. I mean,
I'm talking about Efros. With Efros, a guy who's a major league level talent,
a high major league level talent. I don't, dude. I'm You can tell, like this is not. I can't even think about what to say. I just keep repeating myself over and over again.
Well, you have
Oh
a
God,
personal
if it's Miguel
relationship with
Andujar, and that's all they get is some dude who the Yankees been trying to shop for years, who they can't move. Like, oh my God.
but you have a personal relationship with Scott Efros and his family, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've been following him for years, and just being able to kind of catch up with them, and I've talked to his dad several times at games, and it's been really neat, and that's part of it, is that this is someone who, again, I've mentioned on the show, but I've been on him. He pitched for IU in the College World Series, and I'm an IU fan, and so I knew of him from his college days. So seeing him drafted by the Cubs and come up and make those changes, we were the first ones to have the news of him switching to sidearm and kind of how he went about that. We followed up with him. He's been on the show a couple times, and so to see that, has been really neat, and that's more of a personal thing. And yeah, is it cool to be able to be like, yeah, I know this guy who's pitching for the Cubs, but it's more just about what was really cool is I talked to his dad when Scott was still at AAA, and at the time it was blowing his dad's mind that, like, my son is just a step away from the majors. A couple weeks later, he gets promoted, and then earlier this season, I was at a game in Cincinnati, and I looked over and I see his dad, so I went and talked to him. He said, it's amazing. He said, we used to have to go out and seek out information, whether it was articles or whatever about him. They'd have to go find that stuff somewhere. And it'd be, in a paper from Myrtle Beach or South Bend or whatever, right? And so he was like, but now, like, we've just got this stuff. It's all over the place. Like, it's incredible for them to have seen that, because it's just not something, I think, as much as that's always any player's dream, to see that happen, and it took him a while, and he really was a grinder to get through all that. But man, it just, and that was a dude who, I mean, he is a great person, just an awesome family, awesome individual. And I looked at that and said, man, here's a guy with the way the Cubs are doing this, is going to get a real shot.
Hayden Wesneski for Ross, the Yankees' number 7 prospect.
Right, I mean, that's a decent return if he's there. Well, number 7 overall.
What it says. That's Ken Rosenthal.
I mean,
I don't know anything about Hayden Wesneski.
I guess, but I'm like, there's no such thing as a pitching prospect. You have a pitcher right there who's one of the most appearances in Major League Baseball. High leverage. He's already there. So what is this guy gonna, you know what I mean? Like, okay, great, we got a prospect. Goodness.
Kind of crazy. Yeah. So, wow. Okay. We were talking about Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ, and it seems like now everybody is on the block, because if they're trading Scott Efros, why wouldn't you trade Christopher Morel?
Yeah. I mean, if that, and so here's,
the Cubs are going to be champions again in 2034.
Can we look at, man, I am having a tough time. Not because let's move off of Efros in general, but the fact that, again, you're talking about a controllable, projectable bullpen arm, a guy who could lock that down for the next 5 years at a very low cost, relatively speaking. This move, now we'll see what else they do, but this to me does not signal a team that's like, yeah, we want to be competitive next year or the year after, right?
Yeah. Or the year after that, like 2025.
I mean, that just seems really strange.
Because where do you get a guy like this? I mean, unless it's, and if you look at the prospects that they have in their system right now, I mean, it's not like they're stacked. Yes, they did just draft 16 pitchers. Maybe they think that one of those guys is going to step in by the time. I mean, wow, this just totally resets my thought process in terms of what the Cubs must be thinking when their next window of competitiveness is going to be. And if you're trading Scott Efros, there is no way on earth you're thinking that your next window is going to start in 2023. So we can just go ahead and cross that right off.
That's what it would seem. I mean, unless this dude they got for him, and again, I'm admittedly, I do not know much about him. I mean, I think he's he's their number 7. Obviously, there's certainly some projection right there, and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. He could end up being really, really good, and he's what? Is he in AAA? Is that where so I mean, maybe he's close. But again, this is the problem I have with trading. It's one thing if you're talking about a player you're not going to re-sign, you got to move him and you get a bunch of players. I unless this dude comes in and his lights out almost immediately, it's really tough to understand how this works. I don't get it. I really don't. Not from the player perspective. Like even I don't want to even talk about the direct immediate players involved, but the concept of what it means is where I'm struggling a bit.
So Wisniewski is in the AAA system for the Yankees. He is 24 years old, 24 years and 7 months old. A right, 6'3", 210. Looks like when he drafted in 2019, round 6, the 28th and 195th overall pick. His numbers, yeah, I mean, he's got a 3.51 ERA, 4.71 xFIP. Doesn't give up a lot of home runs. Doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, 8.33 strikeouts per 9. Doesn't walk a lot of guys, 2.81. Interesting as to, I don't know the Yankees situation in terms of their bullpen or why this guy would or would not have been brought up at some point in time. I just
the
don't
Yankees
know.
Have one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. You know what I mean? Like they just got better. But if this guy and as we're seeing here in the comments, like if this dude was really, really good, he might already be up.
But a 1-to-1, there's got to be another player involved here. It doesn't make sense to trade a guy who's clearly very good and almost unhittable, not completely, with all this control for a minor league guy who's never gotten any playing time. There's got to be another player involved.
I don't think. I mean, unless this is one of those where it's like a back scratch kind of a thing where there's some other sort of a secondary deal that happens later that looks lopsided in the other direction. And again, I mean, I get it. The Cubs have loaded up on minor, but we're talking about a team that's had trouble developing pitchers. And here's a pitcher they developed. They drafted him. They brought him up. They said something wasn't going well. You've plateaued. You need to change this. He did change it. He becomes a lights out bullpen guy. With the kind of stuff that is still improving, I firmly believe Efros can continue to be at least as good as what he's been. So to move him for a prospect, and again, I don't care how good you are, a prospect is a prospect.
Yeah,
and again, okay, if we're talking about Michael Givens, or so for a number 6, yeah, hell yeah, man, I'd be like, that's great, because you're trading 2 months of a guy for maybe they were like, hey, we'll take your that sidearm righty, and the Cubs were like, cool, and the Yankees were like, great, we got Efros. No, we meant Givens. That's it. Like that would be. I mean, obviously that's not the case, but it is wild to me. Like, that's what's so funny. And maybe this guy is super good, but I'm just looking at it like, this is seriously the return I would expect for, like an Andrew Chafin type deal last year. It is, man, that's weird. Like, you're talking 5 years of a player. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or,
that's
4
all.
plus
That's the value of that. And the thing is that, as the CBA negotiations were going on and we looked into kind of what the issues were there, the biggest takeaway for me personally was the value of prospects and the value of draft picks specifically of those teams. And really what that is telling you is that it's the value of young players. And so to me, while a draft pick is very valuable, really the most valuable player for a major league team is a young kind of first year player that is very projectable at a high level. And that is exactly what Scott Efros is. So to understand why we're so baffled is you have to wrap your brain around here is about as young as you're going to get, as controllable as you're going to get, with about as much upside and as much proven major league talent for a reliever that you're going to see, who's just been traded for a prospect. And prospects don't, and this is a guy who has not pitched 1 minute in Major League Baseball. And so it's just, yeah, I'm assuming that the Cubs brass see something that we're just not getting at this moment in time. But like I said, hopefully there's another guy that's coming.
Yeah, I just part of it's a personal connection, and now I'm going to have to cheer for the Yankees or a Yankee, along with Rizzo. I just don't get it. I still do not get it. That's the issue that I'm coming up with. But whatever.
Seriously, why are you putting Bleacher Nation status stuff? I'm just deleting that. This is Cubs Insider, so we really don't care what's going on over there at Bleacher Nation. Sorry. Although Brett's a nice guy. So, anyways, yeah, just kind of crazy. That just dropped right now, and so definitely not what we were thinking. But now that just makes you kind of think that, oh my God, who is next for the Cubs? Because it's like if Efros is gone, and there are more, this is going to turn into last year they traded away guys who were coming up. Last year made much more sense than what just happened.
Yeah, that's weird, man. If they're trading controllable players, that's what I'm saying. If they're trading controllable players,
is Nico?
I don't mean half. Traded? I'm talking like multiple years of control remaining after this one. That is different. That is not really what we would expect. So we'll see. I got to look at some things. I don't know anything about the guy. I haven't seen video. Other than the stats you share, I have no idea. So we'll figure it out. But thankfully you've got something in the pipe on that, and I don't have to worry myself with writing about it, which is probably good. If I were to get in there and share my thoughts on the matter, it probably would devolve too quickly into just me being pissed. So, yeah, I'm glad you're on it.
Yeah, well, temporarily. I've paused my on itness because I can only concentrate so much. But okay, anyways, we'll get that out here shortly, and otherwise, yeah, wow, pretty crazy. Okay, so are the Cubs done being sellers? Was kind of one of my questions of today, and then I also had a bullet untouchable players. I'll tell you, when I wrote the bullets out for kind of what we were going to discuss today on the show, and I wrote untouchable players, I thought we were actually going to be able to have a conversation about several players who were untouchable. But clearly, I think this changes everything. I mean, is Nico Horner untouchable? Is Christopher Morel untouchable?
Nope. No, I mean, I don't.
Then what are you trying to do at this point? I guess would be my question here. Is that do you just want to win, or are you like some junkie who just kind of gets off on this trade hype? It's good for the website for like a week, and then it gets back to reality of a team that just isn't good and is getting worse, and has a really great minor league system.
How the hell are they going to if they get rid of? They're going to get rid of Givens and Robertson, and they just got rid of Efros. What the hell are they going to do for the last 4 innings of these games? Because Brandon Hughes and Rowan Wick can't throw every inning. I mean,
we don't want Rowan Wick throwing.
Well,
Wick's been terrible this year.
True. Maybe he gets moved too. Who knows? They'll just call up everybody out of it. But man, that just completely blindsided me. I think is the weird thing about it. And I again, we'll have to wait and see. It is. I will say this. I as I did mention it earlier, right, in terms of getting McKinstry back. So now you've got a major league, not just ready, but a guy who they immediately added to the roster. With this Wisniewski, again, AAA, highly ranked prospect. The assumption is that he might be ready to go right post deadline, along with Caleb Killian and some others, because they're going to move some. So there'll be some spots. So on one hand, I do look at that and say, although they've got other guys coming up too. On one hand, I do look at it and say it does appear that they've gotten some MLB ready guys. The thing that's funny about it though is that how they have gone about it in this case is certainly different from what I would have expected. Right, that's two relievers, two of their righty relievers, two more to go, who have maybe brought back MLB ready type guys. Although, again, one of those was an MLB. Well, they both were MLB players, but one was on a short term deal. So that's where I guess I don't know, unless this works out really, really well, how that makes sense. And again, is it possible that there's another deal in the works with the Yankees, where we can't agree on everything, but maybe we'll move this one, and now we've got another one coming. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Wow. Needless to say, shocking. And all went down live while we were doing the show. So I guess we can always go back and remember. Hopefully it works out really good for the Cubs. And this Wisniewski guy is he's got a fun name. Turns out to be somebody who's just like this stud, diamond in the rough type guy that Carter Hawkins thought was just the most incredible. Although Carter Hawkins, I'm not even sure he works for the Cubs anymore. But he's I think he is, right. He's like locked in a room somewhere over off Clark.
I hope so. He better be locked, because I'm gonna go bang down that door, dude.
So yeah, this is going to be really interesting. We may have to circle back with another show after the trade deadline after tomorrow, just for the heck of it. Let me look at the schedule. I don't even know who the Cubs are playing anymore. It feels like it doesn't even matter.
Here. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So it's always good, going through and getting rid of every single talented player on your team. We thought it was just going to be, a couple obvious guys, but now with Efros going, it's just shocking. I can't wait to see what the national pundits say about this move, because I just can't believe that anybody's going to be like, oh yeah, this is a solid move. Saw it coming. No.
Yeah.
And so it'll be very interesting. I'm going to turn on MLB Network after this, because I'm sure this is, and it's already, look at this. The headlines on the Cubs.com. Yankees trade for Efros, and they have source. So the Cubs are actually trying to be like a blog. They are posting reported information on Cubs.com.
Well, I hope my text to him didn't break the news to him. That would kind of suck.
Yeah. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Okay, so the Cubs play the Cardinals for going to get kicked around by the Cardinals for 3 games until Thursday, and then they have a Friday game. They have a Thursday night game and then a Friday day game against the Marlins, who and then they have a 6-game homestand Marlins Nationals. So yeah, we may have to circle back during the Cardinals series. I mean, honestly, the way this show was set up to kind of operate was so we would do a show after every series, but where the series don't really even matter anymore, we'll pretty much just do it whenever kind of news breaks. And
maybe we should do it during the games. That way we don't have to watch them.
Might have a better audience. So yeah, so I guess maybe we'll circle back on what Wednesday, maybe.
Sure.
Just to see the carnage.
Probably better. See. I mean, part of me's like, we should do one at 6:05 on Tuesday, and then I'm like, it might just be.
We have to have time to digest everything, though. I mean, like this caught us completely off guard. We need to kind of figure this out real quick, at least mentally, like digest it, before we can react to it. So yeah. All right. We'll circle back on Wednesday. Until then, everybody take care. Hopefully there's not any more trades that don't make any sense, but I'm anticipating there's going to be a whole lot of trades that don't make sense coming down the pipeline here. So get ready for that. Good luck, everyone.
See ya.
See you later.